Another episode. I say episode like it's a podcast. It's not a podcast. I don't even know what kind of cast it is. It's something. But anyway, welcome to another one of our rethinking personal branding conversations. This time we're focused on the topic: can personal branding impact recruitment and retention? And I'm so glad that you all are joining me again today. Let me just make sure we're live on LinkedIn and that we're live on YouTube as well. I think so. From the look of things, it looks like we're live. We better be. Okay, yes, I can see myself on LinkedIn. So, yay, we're live. Anyway, welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And most importantly, thank you to our guest, Abby Oshikoya. You know, Abby Oshikoya Yusuf. I was telling my team, I said from Abby's name, from Abby Bola's name, you can bring so many nicknames. In fact, they were calling you Bola. I say her name is not Bola. Nobody calls her Bola. We call her Abby. We call her Abby. You know that there are so many nicknames that we can bring out, from your name. But good evening, Abby, and thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Good evening.
Good evening. So we've shared your profile before. You know, you're our star HR. You're here on behalf of the
Hmm.
HR Professional Network of Nigeria and the UK and the world. But I will ask people to take it easy, take it easy. Abby is not the reason for anybody's problems. She only came she only came here to have a really great conversation with us. But most importantly, I'm really happy that you're here because I think that when it comes to HR and recruitment, retention, and things like that, that people a lot of times make a lot of assumptions. People think, oh, maybe HR is the reason why I didn't get this, or people think, oh, maybe that recruiter put in so much effort, but she didn't see it or he didn't see it. And when it comes to personal branding, I think it's important for us to know if all the work we do in trying to position ourselves differently, if it really matters to the other side of the table, the people who are key stakeholders. One of these stakeholders, of course, is HR, especially for people who are trying to look for a job or getting into a new industry, or even want to climb up the corporate ladder, so to speak, or get on board, or whatever the case may be. And that's why I really wanted to have a conversation with a recruiter and a HR professional, and I couldn't think of anybody better than you. So thank you so much and welcome again. So,
You're welcome.
Abby, can you?
Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So, can you just give us a bit of a background into, how you got started and what you really like about, this HR profession? What do you really like about it? Because I know it's incredibly stressful. So, please tell us your
Hmm.
motivation.
It is. It is. How did I get into HR? That's an interesting question. Um, okay, so I think for me, the personal interest when I think it was the year after I graduated school while I was waiting for NYSC. And then I got a job in an advertising agency. And typically as an intern, when you start working somewhere, they take you around. So I think the first month or the first couple of months, I was just put on a rotation, different departments. You sit here, try and understand how it works. Sit here, try and understand how it works. And then I did that, did the whole works, and ended up being in I think I spent a bit of time in the strategy department, and I spent some time with the copywriters. I think I can't even remember anymore. It's been such a long time,
Mhm.
but I know that um, my interest in HR started from there because I just liked the way everybody used to go to the HR manager. Even though I didn't really spend much time there, I'm like, everyone will go to her for everything. She was like the small mommy of the company. You need something, you go. Anyway, that was where the interest started, and then I started looking into. And then, of course, when it was time for me to um go and do my masters, I already had a few options. HR was one of the considerations, and I just settled for that, and that's really how I got into it. But
That's
now, to be honest, sometimes I look at it now and I'm like, my God, the stress because now I'm a consultant. I don't work in any I think it's easier when you work in just one organization
nice.
and it's just that organization you're focused on, and you're dealing. But now that I work with multiple organizations simultaneously, as one person is calling, bringing this problem, another one is calling with that problem, another one, sometimes I'm like, my God, why did I choose this life?
I can imagine.
But it's interesting. For me, the beauty in HR is that You don't know what's going to happen every day. You wake up and it's a different day every day. Anything can happen. Anything. I've had to meddle in the weirdest of things. Weirdest,
I,
So
I can
yeah,
imagine. I can imagine. It's kind of like a mom, and everybody's like calling for attention. Me. This one did this, that one did that. So I can
yeah,
imagine. But we're
yeah,
really grateful to
yeah.
have great people like you because, honestly, when I think of recruitment, I just like when I see the post from Amy Consulting, when I see your work, I'm like, yes, this is what HR should be saying. Please let people work from home. There's fuel scarcity. Let them work from home. Because I feel like
Employers don't like me.
they can't like
Employers
you
don't
because
like me.
I
They
feel
always attack me.
I feel like
Every
you're
time
the
I post that thing,
I feel like you're
they
the
don't
HR for
like
the
me.
people because I'm like people are suffering, and even though I understand that some measures need to be put in place, at least just let's be
Yeah,
compassionate. So anyway,
exactly. That's it.
let's get right into it. Would you say that what would you say really? Let's start with recruitment. When you're like
Okay.
trying to recruit a person in whatever position, junior, senior, what would you say really
Mhm.
stands out for you in recruitment?
Okay. So for me, I would link this to personal branding because I mean that's the theme of this whole conversation that
Yes.
we're having. And it's really who you put yourself forward to be, starting
Mm,
from, of course, in recruitment, the first thing that most employers or prospective employers or most recruiters will see is your resume,
yes.
right? Or your online profile
Mm,
or your LinkedIn profile, or you've put something somewhere and it has caught somebody's attention. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I was on LinkedIn, I was doing something else, something random, and then some lady's profile caught my attention. I'm like, this is the kind of person that I would love to work with, you know. And
wow.
I saved her profile. And
Mm,
then last week, an opportunity opened up in my company. Well, almost opened up. Anyway, long story short, I reached out to her. I just remembered that, oh, yeah. So I had her in mind since that day. And then I reached out to her and then we started having a chat. And even though I realized along, the chat that what she was looking for was different from what I was looking for, the point is that she put herself out there in a
mm,
way that I was able to reach out to her and say, your profile caught my attention. I want to work with you. And that's really what
mm,
it is with recruitment. Whatever
mm,
it is, I always tell people, for example, if you start with your resume is like, it's like your personal billboard. It's what speaks for you when you're not there. When somebody's reading your resume and
yeah.
you see something, you're not there to say, if I see something on your resume that I'm not sure about, you're not
Mm,
there at that time to tell me until I invite you to the interview. There's no way you can tell me, oh, that's not what it is. You
yeah.
misunderstood me. And sometimes
Mm,
that can make or break. I can see something in your resume and I'll be like, no, I don't want this person. And I could see something
mm,
that will catch my attention and I'll say, that's the
yeah.
person I actually really want to work with. So it's what you put out there, how you put yourself out there, what people see when they see your resume, when they see your profile, even when they see you. We'll get to that, seeing you physically,
Yeah.
but it's really what you represent, really, in
Mm.
whatever form, whether it's on a paper, whether it's online, whether it's physically, whatever it is what you represent. That's really what recruiters are looking out for.
I really like that. And when it comes to what people represent, I want us to dig a little deeper into that. So
Yeah.
when you see a profile, for example, like let's say you're recruiting for a role, I at least from your conversation, I see that you actually do check out some of these candidates on LinkedIn,
Mhm. Yeah, sure.
or any other place where they may have some footprint or appearance
Hmm.
or whatever the case may be. What are you really, apart from like the core skills that the person should have to fill in that role and maybe experience, is there any other thing that you would say, would really catch your
Yeah. There are
interest,
so many
that,
other things. So
okay?
me personally, and I don't know if this applies to other HR professionals, I
Yes.
am very um I have a personal policy, right? If I come across a resume or even a human being while I'm
Mm,
interviewing them or we're just having an interaction, if I cannot work with you, I wouldn't send you to my client,
hmm,
right? So those things, those little things sometimes that we ignore. For example, your maybe because I have taken professional courses and I'm
yes.
a professional trainer in resume writing and all of that.
Yeah.
I take those things very, very serious. So things like typographical errors, for me, it's a no no because you have a computer. Come on,
Mm,
you are typing it on. When you type a wrong word,
mm,
it highlights it in red.
really?
So if you've seen that red and you still go ahead and send me that resume, number one, it tells me that you don't pay attention to detail.
Mm,
And I don't think there's hardly any job that you want to, apply for, you're
mm,
putting yourself for, that you don't need to pay attention to detail.
mm,
Hardly, hardly, So little things like that matter. So sometimes you would see a resume, just looking at it, just looking at what it looks like in itself.
yeah.
You don't even want to read it because it
Mm,
just looks tacky. It just looks messy. You don't even know where to start from. There are just maybe like so many different kinds of prints on it,
mm,
so many different kinds of bullet points, and you're like, my God, this thing just looks like a mess. Where do I start from? So it's really, in Nigeria, what we call packaging. It starts
mm,
with those little. Package
mm,
yourself very good. Just have a simple, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to put in too much information.
yeah.
A simple document, and this is me talking particularly about the resume, but
Yeah.
there's so many other things. A simple document that highlights your key, very, that word is key, your key skills, your
Mm,
key accomplishments,
mm,
and the experiences that are relevant to what you're applying for. So for example, you see some resumes where somebody's applying as a business development manager,
yeah.
we are seeing, you are just seeing all sorts of jobs, and you're like, okay, how do I want to put you forward for this role now? I don't even understand. Okay, so for example, today we interviewed a lady for a business development role, right?
Yeah.
And then when we asked, one of the questions we asked her was, so this company, we are told her what they do in the company. You've been a sales person, you have sales experience. Now you're going into a business development role, which is slightly different, but still in the same line. What are you? How are you going to transfer the skills that you already have as a salesperson into this role? And then this lady was talking about a course she just attended and all the digital marketing skills that she learned. And I'm
Mm,
like, so it's really staying consistent with what your brand is.
mm,
Who are you? That's where you, so before you even start putting any document together, whether it's your resume, whether it's your LinkedIn profile, whether it's whatever kind of online or offline profile you're trying to put, there are certain questions you ask yourself. Who am I? What am I trying to achieve with this? What do I want people to see or to perceive
mm,
about me when they see me or when they see this thing?
mm,
Answer those hard questions and then translate it into whatever document it is. You cannot want to be an HR professional and then go and write a resume in administration and say,
mm,
well, they are related. It's not going to work.
yeah.
So it's really staying consistent with what
Yeah.
it is that you are after,
Mm,
and just pursuing
thank you
pursuing
for
that.
that. Thank you for that, Abby. I also wanted to find out that, since we're still on recruitment, I know that there are a couple of people who have been in industries for 10 years, 15 years, and all of a sudden they realize that, they want to do something more meaningful, or they want to do something that, this whole problem, of course, because of the higher unemployment rate and all these type of issues. Um, sometimes people just basically take what they get in the immediate. And then
Mm,
10, 15 years after, they're a little more stable, kids are in school,
mhm,
they can take some risks.
mm.
They're like, okay, what is that thing that I really wanted to do? And, they start revisiting that for those who are able to take the risk. So for those
Yeah.
people, it's like 10, 15 years, some of them it's even 16 years or more. What will you
Mm.
say is the most important, things for them to consider, when they want to move from one industry to another? I know people would usually say transferable skills, but I still realize that it's a huge leap, for you to move from one industry to
Very.
another. So what kind
Mhm.
of things will you say that people should consider
Hmm.
when they want to do that?
It's always a very tricky one, and unfortunately, there are so many people in Nigeria now
Hmm,
that fall in that category because number one, it starts from even when you're going to university. You don't get the course that you really want to study; they just throw you in one course,
absolutely.
or your parents want you to study one course and then you want to study another course, and then you've done this thing for 10, 15 years, and then you suddenly realize that this is not where I belong. I need to start all over. Or like you said, you even study the course that you want, but then you don't find any job or anything to do in that line, and then you just take the first thing that comes because you're tired of staying at home, and then you just get soaked in. You start having kids, you have
Yeah.
bills to pay, and then you can't leave that job, and then before you know it, you spend 5 years, 10 years, and then you're 40, and then now you're thinking, God, Where do I start from? Sadly, so many people,
Yeah.
so many, especially in the banking industry. Nigeria's banking industry is so, I don't know, it's one special industry, you know. So many people got into
Yeah.
banking when banking was very lucrative. You know, if you think back 15, 10, 15, 20 years ago, when they used to pay bankers 150, 200K, which was big salary at the time,
That's true.
everybody wanted to work in the bank. Everybody wanted to work. And so many people ran to the bank, and then so many of them now are seeing other new industries opening up, and then they're trying to get into those industries and they can't. Why? Because they don't have the skills, or age is no longer on their side, or
Yeah.
so many things. So when you find yourself in such a situation, what do you do? Where do you start from? I would say, number one, you have to do a lot of self learning.
Mm.
It starts with self learning. You can't just sit somewhere and say, I've had so many people, for instance, call me to say, oh, I want to switch to HR. I don't know. How do I start? What do I do? And I always tell them, it's not just about, so because the typical thing most people do is, oh, I've registered for SHRM,
Mm.
I've joined CIPM, I'm taking all these certifications online. Amazing, beautiful. You have to do those things. They are absolutely necessary. However, the more important thing is a lot of self-learning. So it's not really about you doing the certifications and getting, some kind of paper that says I have done this for 6 months or whatever. It's really what you know, because by the time you start facing people at interviews and they ask you questions, and then I think another problem is that a lot this thing is it's a really deep thing, honestly, because I say so because a lot of times it's difficult for these people, because at the time when you are now thinking about that switch, the rational thing to do is to start from scratch. But your economic situation does not allow
Yeah.
you to start from scratch,
Absolutely.
because at that time you already have bills to pay, you
Mm.
have kids to feed,
You have a
you
certain
have a family.
lifestyle. You're not going to tell your kids to start
Yes,
going to public school now because you want to pursue
exactly.
your dreams.
Yes. So it's extremely difficult. So I always tell people that, number one, if you are the one that, if you are lucky and Otedola or Dangote is your daddy or your husband and you have a lot of money, forget about making money for now.
Mm.
Look for an organization where you can just learn and grow. Don't think about how much they're going to pay, even if they say they're not paying you anything. If you are fortunate and you have some other source of income, maybe you have somebody else that's catering for you, or you have a side hustle that can, help you nurture your ambition. All well and good. Look for somewhere where you can just learn and grow. That is the best way to go about it. So
Mm.
you learn and then do a lot of self-learning. Read, and read. There's so much. The internet has blessed us, honestly. Let's not
Yeah.
even lie. I don't think there's really anything that we're looking for that we cannot find
Hmm.
online. So you have to read, and it's not just reading articles online. Buy books, do whatever it is that you have to do. But if you find yourself in a situation where you cannot afford that luxury of somebody's taking care of me, I don't have a side hustle to fund
Yeah.
this, this my ambition, then you might just be restricted to, taking those courses and growing organically. Just keep learning on your own until you are comfortable enough to maybe go for an interview somewhere. And if you're lucky, maybe you can just get a mid-level role, for example. It might not be anything as big as what you were doing before. But what I just tend to tell people is, look, manage your expectations when things like this happen. Don't think you might be lucky, but in most cases it doesn't happen. Don't think that, oh, where I work right now, I'm a manager, I'm already earning like maybe 900K, 1 million, and then I want to move to another industry and I'm looking for the same salary. An industry where you have zero experience, where you don't really have the knowledge, is extremely difficult.
Hmm.
So thing is, just manage your expectations.
Hmm.
Manage it and be ready to put in the hard work, because
Hmm.
in many cases you'll be starting from scratch.
Hmm.
In many cases
Hmm.
you most likely be starting from scratch.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for that, especially, around just managing your expectations. Because the last guest that we had on this show, he was, even though, his case was very interesting. So maybe I'll say he was one of the lucky ones. But in addition to that, he took a lot of risks. So he was moving from the creative industry, from advertising, actually, from advertising to filmmaking. And I remember that, to get in there, what he did is, after, a lot of self learning, just like you said. he actually shot a movie on a mobile phone. And that was his entry,
Wow.
because that movie, it was even shown at film house cinemas, after he shot the
On
movie.
his
And
phone.
yeah, he shot it on his mobile phone. So when he wanted to make that leap, he knew he needed some big bang thing. So
Mm-hmm.
after learning,
Mm-hmm.
putting some money aside, having side hustle, a lot of these things that you said, he needed something that would give him that big break, because the film industry is very
Mm.
saturated. There's so many
Mm.
people there, and there are people who have been there for years. So that was what he did, and that was his big break. And he really was telling people about how, even after they learn and they save, you must be willing to take that risk, to
Mm.
get in. But I wanted to ask you, Abby, now that you've mentioned this, that do you personally think that recruiters, even outside yourself, give people who are transferring from one industry to another, do you think that they give them a fair chance? And if not, what do you think that, those restrictions may be for them, for taking a chance on someone? Will you take a chance on
Yeah.
someone, and why?
Honestly, it's difficult. It's difficult because for any recruiter or for any business owner, so even for me, I might, maybe because of on compassionate grounds, I can say, you know what, I would like to take a chance on this person. But when it's not my business, it's difficult for me to do that. I can make a
Mm,
recommendation to the business owner to say, look, I think we should take a chance on this person. But then the business owner looks at me and tells me, I'm bringing somebody in to make money. I don't want somebody that I have to train or I have to teach or I have to. So not everybody can accommodate that,
mm,
you know. So it's difficult. It's really difficult because at the end of the day, the reason why people are hired is to produce results. When somebody
yeah.
is hiring you, they're not hiring you because, oh, she's very pretty. Some people do that anyway, but that but in most cases, that's not really what
That's
anybody wants.
unfortunate.
That's not really what most people want. Most people want
Yeah.
somebody who can deliver, someone who can deliver, someone who would come and hit the ground running. So everybody's saying now that Tinubu has come in 2 weeks, you already done this, blah, 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 hit the ground running, basically.
Mm,
That's what most people are looking for. And you find
mm,
that a lot of times, even when we hire people that are experienced, we have a lot of, for me as a recruiter, it's very frustrating because sometimes we've gone through this very rigorous recruitment process, and then this person has resumed. Expectations are high, expectations are always high from
mm,
employers. And then 2 3 weeks down the line, the employer is calling you to say, this person that you gave me, oh, me, I don't understand, oh,
mm,
and I always tell them, look, we need to give them time. Let's be patient. But truth, employers don't have time. They just want to make money. They just want to
mm,
see the results. And that's why
mm,
it's difficult to give people like that a chance, because they're like, look,
mm.
I don't have that luxury of giving somebody a chance. And so, more often than not, when they give such people chances, they give them chances at internships or at roles where, you know what, I already have somebody that is doing the real work. You just
Yeah.
come and support. You just come in and support and learn and grow. And then maybe, if whatever reason, by the time you know what you're doing and that person leaves, you can step into their shoes. But honestly,
Mm,
it's difficult. It's difficult. Not that we don't take chances on people. We do that sometimes, and sometimes it works out.
yeah.
Sometimes it does work out, but sometimes not. I have personal experiences from my own company, actually. When I hire
Yeah.
people, sometimes there are people who don't really have any experience, or they don't have that much experience, but then they come in and they surpass my expectations. Sometimes they just come in and they come in so
Yeah.
much fire, and then they do this and they do that. So that's really
Hmm.
yeah.
Speaking about that, I wanted to ask that. Do you think that people who have, I think two things. Let's first of all start from the point where, to really talk about substance versus packaging. Because I think that sometimes as well, I only just found out last week that when you send people all these like tests and like all those interviews and stuff like that, like the stuff you have
Mm-hmm.
to fill out. I can't remember what it's called before you come for an actual interview, right? that people actually outsource these things. I was in shock. I'm like, people do that? Like they
What,
actually
like
outsource
the
these things.
interview forms or
Yeah, interview questions. So if you give them like
okay.
case studies, go and answer it, then you come and present. Like people actually
Oh right.
outsource it, not
Okay.
on site. So now, I really want us to talk about, because especially because you said, sometimes people come into the organization and they don't perform, like the expectations are not met. So
Mm.
how would you say, what's really that fine line between, over packaging, like, like over promising what you clearly cannot deliver? Because, sometimes people package, 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 but there's no actual
Ah,
substance.
tell
So
me
what
about
would you
it.
say is actually important? What should you do first? And what is
Mm.
more important for you in the long term? Not just, oh, I need to do this so I can get on this board or get this job or
Yeah,
whatnot.
yeah. Sadly, that happens a lot. In fact, I have so many personal stories I can share with that. There's a guy that we interviewed one time. When I saw his CV, I was so excited. This guy had worked in like KPMG, very, I'm like, God, we must meet this guy. I had worked in some big, big companies. And he came and I was so disappointed. I'm like, how? I couldn't reconcile the
Yeah.
CV with the person that was in front of me. He couldn't even answer questions correctly. So a lot of times there's a lot of over packaging happens, and that's why even for me as a resume writer, I'm usually extremely careful. So many people, when they reach out to me to write resumes for them, they'll tell me, they ask me so many weird questions. One of the most popular questions I get is also, because it's a paid service, right? Also, if I pay
Yeah.
you for this thing now, are you assuring me that I'm going to get a job? I'm like, no, I can't assure you that you're going to get a job. A
Yeah.
resume does not get you a job. A resume gets your foot in the door. It
So,
gets you an
yeah.
interview. And then when you get the interview, it's up to you what you do at that point. Now, even for the resume writing, a lot of them, once they hear that, oh, there's somebody somewhere that can write a resume, all they think they need to do is send you what they have and they expect you to do the magic. And I tell them, no, I'm not a magician. You and I are going to work on this thing together, because I'm not going to produce a document that you will now go somewhere and not be able to defend. So whatever
Mm,
it is that is on your resume has to be something that wherever you go, you can talk about it comfortably, not something that somebody has written for you. And sadly, that's what a lot of people do. They just get somebody to pay, or they'll go online, look for one beautiful template, copy it,
mm,
send it, and then you see the resume, you're so excited to meet the person, and then you invite them to an interview, and then they fall your hand.
mm,
So really, it's really just knowing exactly what matters at that point. I'm applying for a job. What does this recruiter want to see? What are they looking for? And that's what
mm,
really you should be putting in your resume. So you should think about things like when you read job descriptions. So again, I think another big mistake that people make is you just have this generic resume. We're all guilty of it, and
mm-hmm,
I can't blame anybody really. Reason being, writing a resume is not, it's not child's play. It's
mm-hmm,
not that simple. It's not that easy to do. So a lot of times you hear people saying, "Ah, are you saying that every time I'm applying for a job, I need to change my resume? I need to." Maybe not every time, but you need to do regular updates, because two different employers might be looking for two completely different things, and you might have those skills, but just in a different way you put it in your resume. So, and that's why you see now that a lot of, especially when if you are familiar with applying for international jobs, they don't ask for resumes anymore. Many of them don't ask for resumes anymore. You fill out an actual application. They will ask you questions. They ask you situational questions. They ask you, all different kinds of, because they want to see that the skills you have, they can apply it to that role, that because they know that if they ask for a resume, maybe at the end of the application they will it's usually at the end. It's never at the beginning. If you notice, they
mm,
never say
mm,
attach your resume. After you've written like 1 million questions, they now say attach your resume. And then at the end of the form, you're wondering, why did you not ask me all these questions when they knew they were still going to ask for my resume anyway? It's because in most cases that resume is just for formality. Maybe they need it to just look at how you write, or look at
yeah.
your contact details or whatever. It's the actual substance that matters. So over packaging does not work. If you over package yourself, even if you are lucky to get in the interview, you get to the interview and you will still fail. So look at not the fact, you know. So look for the actual substance of what the recruiter is looking for. What do they
Yeah.
really want? You know, there's something that we usually talk a lot about in resume writing. Keywords are very important. So truth on matter, is, as HR people, especially when you are not using a software, you're not using something to help you filter, and you physically have to go through people's resumes, whether it's online or paper. I don't think anybody still does paper anyway, but it's difficult, even when it's online, it's extremely difficult to start looking at everything. So what we do, in all honesty, is to scan through. We don't read in detail. We scan through, and then when we find something that catches our attention, then we read. So when I
Hmm.
scan through your resume or your profile and something
Yeah.
catches my attention, then I stop and then I take my time to read, you know. But the moment I scan through, and scanning through takes a few seconds, I scan through and I'm not seeing anything interesting, I move to the next one straight, So we're looking for keywords, we're looking for those things that, for example, as an HR, maybe I can relate to more to what I do as an
Hmm.
HR person. Somebody's applying for an HR consultant job, or an head of HR job. I'm looking at your resume without even reading in detail. I want to
Yeah.
see some buzzwords popping up. I want to see things like performance management. I want to see things like talent management. When you start seeing those things, you already know that, okay, this person has, even if they've not done it in detail, they've done this, they've touched on this, they've touched on this. Then I will take my time to read through that resume. But if I scan through and I'm not seeing anything interesting, I move to the next one straight away.
Hmm.
So you
Hmm.
really need to know what it is, that it's not just, oh, I'm looking for a job, and I just put something together, and that's it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
So, what would you consider necessary for people? And thanks for that. That was very detailed in terms of what exactly people are looking for. I mean, what would you consider important for people? What's necessary really for personal branding? Do you think it's necessary? And if so, what are the elements that you consider necessary?
okay, so for personal branding, like I said earlier, I think first thing is ask yourself some hard questions. Who am I?
Mm,
What am I trying to achieve? Where am I going in the next, whatever it is, 5, 10, 15 years, you know, and write those things down. You see, the problem is a lot of us, even when we do those things, we just feel like, I know it, I know what I want to do. It's in my head somewhere. I know where I'm going.
mm,
But if you actually do the hard work, write it down. This is where I am right now. This is where I want to get to. It's going to take me
mm,
5 years or 10 years to get there. What do I need to get there? Right. And one of
mm.
those things is putting yourself out as the person, that you want to be. Right. You're
Yeah,
working to who you want to be. So the next thing, after you've done that, is define, okay, so who are the people that I want to target? So it's like in business, it's the same thing. You're trying to sell a product, you are the product, you are the service. You're trying
yeah,
to get employers to notice you. You're trying to get somebody to see that I am good at this thing, right? So once you've done all of that, then you can start building your brand assets, I like to call them. So from your resume to your even your social media presence. So if I Google you, for example, what am I going to find, right? And that reminds me of a story. You see, everything these days, I think, to be honest, everything ties back to branding and
mm,
content creation, more or less. Even your resume is content. Everything
yeah,
is content creation. What are you doing? What kind of content are you putting out there about yourself? So I remember I was watching Your View a couple of months ago, I think, and they shared a story about a woman who wanted to hire somebody, and I think the lady was referred by somebody, and then she said, oh, ask her to come and see me, ask her to call me or something like that. So she spoke to the lady, asked her a few questions, and then she said, you know what, send me a DM on Instagram, right? Send me a DM on Instagram. And she
yeah,
gave her Instagram handle. And so the lady called her back sometime later to say, oh, I've been searching for your profile and I can't find it. And the woman was like, "Ah, how you can't find it, how?" So your call to her that, if you can't find, because my page is not private. So if you can't find my page, one of two things may have happened. It's either I blocked you, and if I blocked you, it means that you've done something that made me block you. Or something is wrong with my account. And she knew that there was nothing wrong with her account because she went to check her account was still active and everything. So she now asked the lady for her own handle and said, okay, you know what? I will send you a DM and then you
Mm-hmm.
can respond. She asked her to send something. I can't really remember the details of the story. Long story short, when the lady sent her her profile, she found out that she had blocked her. And
Hmm.
she said the only people that she blocks are people that have trolled her at one time or another. And now this is somebody that is now coming to look for a job in her company. So all of these things still come back to personal branding. If I Google
Hmm.
you, what do I see? What do I find about you? Are you very polished on your resume? Your resume is so beautiful, so well done. But then when I look at your Instagram page, I'm seeing something else. I'm seeing all the I don't want to use
Okay.
some.
That's a good point that I actually want us to discuss further. Now that you mentioned it, because I mean, I think that really, and I really like that you raised this because it's good to get HR's perspective on this, because for me, I don't, I'm not allowed to say something. This is LinkedIn Live, so that all the people that actually
I
blocked
know.
who don't know I blocked them, who don't know I blocked them. But I think that there's some line between, because I worked in an organization once where, I mean, even when I was on vacation, I find people like trolling me on like my Insta stories, and I'm like, why? And sometimes, I thought this was just me, but I found that other people too, want to keep that space private. So I feel like, if you have something professional that we need to discuss, there's LinkedIn. You can send me an email, even WhatsApp. I don't consider it personal. I know people have integrated it into work now, and it's like yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes those lines have to be drawn. Even though,
Yes.
to be honest, even when I am doing recruitment, either when I was working in the corporate sector or now that I'm consulting, I do check people out online. That's the truth. If they give
Yes.
me their, sometimes I even
Absolutely.
ask because
Yes.
may I
I
ask,
think it's
but
necessary.
yeah,
I
I
think it
think,
is.
yeah, I think it's necessary. I don't necessarily judge them. But for example, if
Yeah.
you're one of the people who were instigated to go and burn down one place or something, let us know.
Exactly.
So stuff like that, I think it's important. However, when people come into the organization, I just feel like there should be some boundaries in terms of, okay, even if I went to a party on Saturday, should
Hmm.
that be part of the reason why
Yeah.
you're judging me one kind
Yeah.
for my appraisal? So I don't know, what's your opinion in terms of, what's professional and not. And that's why I
Yeah.
think that, especially for personal branding, when I work with clients, for example, I don't have any discussions regarding Instagram or anything like that. I tell them that that's not where I think you should be building your professional presence. That I think that you should focus on platforms like LinkedIn. But in addition to
LinkedIn.
that, there are also other platforms, like Medium, if it's that you want to share your thoughts somewhere, or stuff like that. I feel like you should explore these platforms. And even when you present yourself to a recruiter or to whatever the case may be, in addition to your CV, you can either have, like a contact me thing, or a professional portfolio that can show some of your extra work, or
Mm-hmm.
places where they can check you out professionally. So if they now decide to go and check you out in other places, I don't know. But
Mm.
now that you've
Yeah.
raised this, I would like
Yeah.
to,
Okay.
really just like get your thoughts on
Mm.
that.
Yeah. So LinkedIn, yes, is the proper place to be when you want to build a professional brand,
Yes.
you know. However, truth of the matter is, there we are your brand is who you are everywhere, right? Whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on Twitter, wherever you are, your brand is where
Mm,
is is everywhere you are. So my personal recommendation is that if you know that your personal life is totally different from your work life, keep
yes.
your Instagram page or whatever private, right?
Mm,
Keep it private, because the moment it is not private, it means that anybody can look at anything that you do, and it might affect your chances at getting a job, whether you know
mm,
it or you don't, right?
mm.
So that's my personal recommendation. Just keep your page private. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of hiring goes on Instagram. You'll be shocked even on TikTok.
Yeah.
Everywhere. There's no way that
Yeah.
hiring does not go on. You see somebody just because of the way they put themselves out on Instagram or the way they
Yeah.
put themselves out on TikTok, you say that's the person I want to work with me, you know. So
Hmm.
it really depends on your also it depends on your industry, you know, it depends
Yeah.
on okay, so for
I agree.
example, let me give um um what's Tony Elumelu's company? I'm trying to remember the name of the group.
CEF.
No, no,
Um.
not the foundation.
Transcorp.
Transcorp. Yes, Transcorp. You know, Transcorp has a lot of women
Yeah.
at the helm of affairs. The group managing director of Transcorp is a woman.
In fact, all
The
these
MD of,
companies apparently.
yes,
Well, yeah,
exactly.
well, most.
You
Yeah.
know, guess what? If you look at all those women's Instagram profiles, not LinkedIn, Instagram,
Mm,
you can sense the power that they have on Instagram, right? So
mm.
whether Instagram is a professional or not a professional
Hairs
um
holding. Thank you.
holding, thank you. Yes. You know,
Mutuni
whether it's
Transcorp.
a whether it's a
Anyway, yeah.
professional or not a professional platform, you can
I don't know why I
see
can't comment. Yeah.
you you can sense, you know, what they do and who they are on those platforms. So you can absolutely build a brand anywhere you are, whether it's Instagram, whether it's TikTok. The only
Yeah.
thing is, it depends on you. If you think that, so for example, if you look at people in tech, right? Um, Tech people are managed to build a brand about themselves. They are very crazy and creatives as well. I remember that even years ago when I worked in advertising, you know,
Yeah.
the creative guys, they come to work wearing shorts. They have the things that typically in any corporate organization they wouldn't allow. You can weave your hair, you can wear earrings, you know,
Yeah.
when they need to unwind, they stand right there at the door of the office smoking cigarettes and doing all sorts of things. You know, that's because of the peculiarity of the industry, right?
Yeah.
So it really depends on the industry that
Yeah.
you are. It depends
I
on what
think
kind of
so.
image
Yeah.
that you are trying to put yourself. Oh, you can't see my face clearly. I think it's the lighting here. um
Oh, yeah. I only just noticed it myself.
is it okay if I even need to like put on my, is it, let me sort that. I need to put on an extra light. let me
Okay.
let me just do that for a second.
Okay, yeah. It's just weird to just keep quiet. I forgot it's a live stream. I was just keeping quiet. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining, basically. And what we're discussing today is personal branding and whether it can impact recruitment and retention. And we're discussing with Mrs. Abimbola Oshikoya Yusuf. We really wanted to talk to her because she's a HR professional. And we wanted to know if all this efforts regarding branding is just blinking in the dark, or if it actually means something, when HR people are either going to recruit people, or or Mr. Kola Yusuf, I'm ignoring you. When people either want to recruit people, or when they actually want to check out their performance in an organization as well, because a lot of times, as we know, HR is a key stakeholder. They matter when it comes to this conversation. So I think it's important to get their views and their thoughts on this. So that's why we really wanted to have this conversation. And Abby was so generous to give us some of her time today. Just before she went off, she's coming back in a bit. We were really discussing about the bloodlines in between what you consider to be your professional platforms and what you consider to be your personal platforms. And I have always thought that we should draw a line in between both. I don't personally consider Instagram to be professional, but then she made a fair point that for creatives, for people dependent on the industry, you would always find people who use all their platforms generally, because in the end it's still part of the personal brand, or it's still part of who you are, which I think is interesting. And she also made a fair point of, if you don't want your if you don't want basically people to be involved in your social media that you don't consider to be professional, then maybe it's best to just have private accounts. And I also have a suggestion: you can just mute and block everybody. Well, that's crazy, because if they find out, they will eventually hate you. But yes, That's what I know. So many people who are like, oh, the minute they resume at work, they just block all their colleagues or they mute all of them on every platform.
Is it
So
better?
I think yes, yes, it's a lot better now.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
think that
Okay.
yeah, it was interesting to get that viewpoint because I personally also do check people out, on their personal platform. So for example, if you're going to be a serial killer, let's know that you're a serial killer because of one thing that you said or the other, before we
Mm-hmm.
bring you on board. So I think yeah, dependent. I agree that depending on the industry, I just always like people to separate these things because I find that when the lines are blurred, there are always problems. Like the creative industry, for example, is a place that a lot of my career was in advertising. The bulk of it, comes creativity, creative sector. And I find that because these things are not always clearly separated, there's always problem. So for example, somebody asks you to do something after working hours. It's truly after working hours. You're going to make a sacrifice to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
then you say, oh, you're not available, but then they find you, they see you, maybe at a recreational center, or they find you hanging out and they're like, but you said you were not available. Yeah, but it's after his working hours. You know what I mean? So then you begin to troll the person and say, oh,
True.
you're going to fail your appraisal, all that because you were at a
Mm.
recreational center where you could have done it. No, what he does with the time is not your business. It's his
Yeah.
after working hours. If he decides to make that sacrifice, he can make the sacrifice. So that's why for me, I always feel like, those lines should be clearly separated because if not, you know,
I,
nonsense will
I
just start very
I
quickly.
agree with you. I agree with you. And it just reminded me of an incident with I have a particular client that constantly has problems with what their staff post on their WhatsApp status,
Toss.
right? They always complain about what their
Mm.
staff posts, saying that the staff should be posting about the company. I'm like, but their
Ah,
WhatsApp is their personal property. You can't control what
yeah,
they post.
I know someone who got fired for that. Like the
Yeah,
person actually got fired for not posting the company's work on their WhatsApp status. I'm like, that's unnecessary. If you want the
yeah,
person to
very.
do that, give
Mm-hmm.
the person a work from. I mean, sometimes
Exactly.
you can ask, but
Mm.
it's not a basis to like fire someone. You see what I
Okay.
mean? I mean,
Yeah.
it's support, but in the end, let's all just show some
Yeah.
compassion.
So some
Interesting,
people take
interesting.
it too far. I think it's really just finding that
Yeah,
balance. And then also,
yeah.
and so what I generally tend to tell people in those situations is, look, I'm not saying you have to post the company, but maybe you so when you're at work, tone it down a bit. Don't be posting because they will always complain, she sells bags, she's not posting her bags during work hours. The only thing she posts during work hours is the bag that she's selling. She's using our time to be posting bag on WhatsApp.
But
That means people will be
yeah,
chatting her up and they'll be asking her how much is the bag, and then she'll be answering them. So I'm like,
okay, that
you
that
know,
took me out. I think yeah, that's very 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 interesting conversation. And this brings me to another thing. What would you say? We've spoken so much about recruitment, but now when people are in organizations, I mean, I remember that for so many years I had it in my KPIs, about speaking engagements. There'll be personal development, but before I knew it, other things started creeping in, like, oh, what kind of articles have you published? What kind of publications? Did you take any speaking engagements? So when people begin to become like thought leaders or authorities or things like that in their space, how do you think, because that is part of personal branding as well, how do you think that can be relevant to an organization's development? How important will you consider it to be?
in fact, I think that is the bulk of personal branding, making
Mm,
yourself a
mm,
subject matter expert, or whatever it is. And these are things that people get drawn to when they see that, oh, this person is constantly on, even if it's Instagram, not even necessarily LinkedIn, this person is constantly on Instagram
yes.
um talking about some kind of financial analysis or whatever. The day they are looking for a finance analyst, you come to mind, you like, so it's absolutely important, even in the development of the organization in
Yeah.
itself, because um not only does it increase the organization's, what would I say, net worth in terms of people, right?
Yes.
But it also, so for example, look at, um there are some companies that have a particular brand of employees, right?
Mm,
You would say that these are the only kind of employees. Okay, so look at the big fours, for example. They will say, oh, they don't take anybody who has less than a 2-1,
mm,
sort of. Those are ways that organizations can constantly distinguish themselves. So when you are somebody who is a thought leader or a subject matter expert in your area, so imagine that you, Dara, you are hired in a company as head of in branding and marketing, or something
Yeah.
like that. You're a thought leader in that space, and then they hire somebody else who is head of HR, who is also a thought leader in their own space, and then
Yes.
they hire somebody else who is head of, so they're already creating. So it's not just now, it's not just the individual brands, it's also the company brand, because now
Mm.
that company is now known as, look at the example we gave about Hair's Holding, Tony Elumelu's company. Look at all the women
Yes.
that run all of the companies that are under that group.
Mm-hmm.
They are all thought leaders in their own individual spaces, and that's really what it is. So it definitely helps, to write articles online, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Instagram, whether, so me, for example, in my own line of work, and I know that it has really helped me. I do a lot of so okay, so for recently, maybe I should just a very recent one is, I recently started
Yes.
something I call Abby's Weekly Musing, where I talk about different issues that affect employers particularly,
Yeah.
you know. And I noticed that the engagement hasn't been bad, in the sense that I get people now reaching out to me asking questions. So I post it on LinkedIn, but I also post it on Instagram. I also post it on my WhatsApp status. I
Mm.
post it anywhere I can post it, literally. And the engagement comes from all of these places. I have somebody who called me yesterday saying that, oh, she saw my write up on company culture, because I wrote something about
Yeah.
company culture on Monday, how you can improve your company culture, right? And she
Yeah.
said that they're having a cultural issue in their organization. How can I come in and help? So those are ways that you can put yourself out there as a thought leader. It will help you, it would help your company,
Yeah.
right? Write randomly about something, whether it's an article, whether it's a blog post, whether it's a newsletter, whatever it
Yeah.
is. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome. I agree with you. I agree with you, and I really like that you mentioned that, because as I go into a segue for what our course is about, I think that's a very good place to start with. That's a really good way to get in.
Mm,
People, for example, I find that, just like you said, people a lot of times are so concerned about the package, but they don't bother about the content, right?
yeah.
The content of the package is so important, because sometimes we just say, oh, I want people to know me, and every year the first thing they go and do when you say personal brand is that they go and do photo shoots. But is it the photo shoot that's really important? What do you really, first of all, like you said, who
True.
are you? Who do you want to be? What are your values? Are
Mm,
you a compassionate person? Are you a person of
exactly.
integrity? Those are things that matter. Also,
Mm,
what kind of portfolio do you have? So I, for example, since when I have been, and I mean, Abby, you did see my CV before we even knew each other. I would
exactly.
always usually put in a
Hmm.
place even for
That
even
your
for like,
CV.
because I'm like, when did let I remember when I was a recruiter saw my CV and he was like, I only called you because I just wanted to tell you that that was such a good CV. He's
In
like, he
fact,
told his people that this lady is not qualified, but call her, because
I,
I don't care, even if
hmm,
it's like we just need to talk to her. And I would always put stuff in there for the industries that I've contributed to,
yeah,
publications that I've written. And for me, for our personal branding course that I'm going to be launching a couple of weeks, those are the things that are at the core for me. Because you
yeah,
see, you can wake up any day and decide to start talking about yourself, but you cannot wake up any day and create a portfolio from thin air. You have to have
exactly.
put in the work. You have
Yeah,
to have evaluated yourself and say, these are the things that I stand for. For some people, for example, they have a great, like I, for example, I'm very passionate about education and entrepreneurship. And if you look at all the things I currently volunteer in or that I volunteered for in the past, you will see traces of these things, actual
mm-hmm.
evidence where I have
Mm,
served, written something, because these are causes that are near and dear to my heart. So if I say that these are my focus areas, I can back it up. It's not just to write, I'm passionate about SDG Goal 3. What have you done for the SDG Goal 3?
exactly,
So
exactly,
I think sometimes we
exactly.
focus so much about the packaging that we don't bother with what is within. So with this
Mm,
personal branding course, what we really want to help people do is, first of all, understand their values. I know a lot of people are in organizations that, because of our current situation, they don't even know why they are there, how they got there, what they are doing there. They don't know. Food just has to be put on the table, and it's understandable. But now you've been there for 10 years, 15 years, it's time to make a difference. How can we
Mm-hmm.
build that portfolio for you? That's what we want to do. And then show you how you can begin to build these footprints, how you can begin to leave these footprints and like build a brand trail, even outside even LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter and all those places that we know. There are people that if you just Google and check on Medium like this, what's it called, textbook, some people who you even see like publications, like if you Google them like this, like the places where their publications will be coming out, your heart will be having heart attack, just looking at it. So that's what we really want to do. And I'll put the link in the comments. If you want to sign up for our waiting list, you should. Because for the people who are signing up for our waiting list, their package is very different from the people who, will just hear about it and sign up. So you can check out, sign up our waiting. You can sign up for the wait list. You can join our Telegram channel. And of course, join us every other week, where we'll be having these conversations. And now I have to ask you, Abby, that do you think that people should join this personal branding course and why? You can tell the story of this. Please go ahead.
So that's exactly what I wanted to do. So I was like, if you see Dara's CV and talking, first time I ever saw her CV was, I'm trying to remember the year, 2000 and 2015 or so. I can't remember. Sometime around then.
Yeah.
And of course, it has changed. Now, imagine how many years ago that was. And now, so from the moment I saw it, I'm like, of course, this person is a brand, is a brand expert. No better person to have such a course. Maybe you need to see her CV, then you can
Maybe I put a sample on LinkedIn. I was put a sample on LinkedIn.
then you understand what I'm talking about, but really, I think personal branding is super important. It's something that everybody has to learn, irrespective of your industry, your level, you can't say, oh, I'm just an intern, I'm just a copper. Which
Yeah.
brand do I want to build? That's actually where it starts. I
Mm,
have personally come across people who are fresh out of school, in fact, who are still in school. But when you see their profiles, you just want
yeah.
to talk to them. And then it's when you
Yeah.
start talking to them, you now realize that, this person is still in school, oh, they don't even really
Yeah.
have that much experience. But the way they put
That's true.
themselves out there, that really is what branding is, and everybody needs branding, especially now. The way, I mentioned it earlier that all of these things we're talking about, it goes back to branding and it goes back to content creation, right?
Mm,
Even your
yeah.
CV, your cover letter, your job application, everything is still part of whatever. It's your content. It's what you're putting out there. So it's there's no other way to put it. It's super important. Every single person needs it. Everybody. You just
Yeah.
have to have a brand. You can't, except you are living under a rock now. You just have to have a brand. You can't afford not to. Whether it's a big brand or a small brand, you have to have a brand, right?
Mm,
The way the world is now, you can't just be there. It's not
yeah.
possible. You can't just be there and say, well, okay, I've graduated from school. What next? I'm looking for a job. Go
Mm-hmm.
and, not that there are not people like that, but go and look at
Yeah.
those people. Look at them, compare them to people who are consciously taking time out to build a brand for themselves,
Yeah.
and look at the difference. You know,
Yeah.
you just have
Yeah.
to. It's
Yeah.
absolutely necessary. So yes,
Thank you.
I,
Yeah.
I personally recommend that everybody signs up for this course. Everybody.
Woo!
We all, I need it. Everybody needs it.
Yeah,
Everybody.
thank you. Thank you for that, Abby. And just as you spoke now, thank you so much for that. Just going back to really where you started from about, knowing yourself, knowing who you are, knowing what you want to achieve, writing this down. And I really like that because you see, any of the work that you do, it's like how somebody comes to tell you to sell a brand product, and you're like, it's just like how you said people come and tell you to write a resume. About
Mm,
what? What
exactly.
are we writing about? You see,
Mm,
all the branding that you do, all the finesse you do, all the packaging you do is after the matter. The initial work has to be done. And you see, you find that when you actually do that work and you're true and you're genuine, it's easy for you and you're authentic. It's
yeah.
easy for you to then, even in your, as you're building your brand, you can begin to say, oh, but I'm a person of integrity, but am I acting like someone who has integrity? I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying I'm a person of integrity, but I'm taking bribe behind the scenes. Well,
Exactly.
or I'm cutting corners, or I write it in my CV that one of my skills is compassion, but you're the one
Mm.
that when you come into the office, you yell at everybody. So in building your brand, it should be so relevant that you keep doing reviews and you're asking yourself that, am I really who I say I am?
Mm-hmm.
Because like Abby said, when you finish all the packaging and you come and you're in my office for 1 month and everybody has resigned because you're so toxic, we
Mm,
already know that there's a disconnect between what you presented to us and who you
exactly.
really are.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important for us to, just like you said at the beginning, to do that work, to do that initial work, and then create the package after. So I
Mm.
put the link to the course in the comment section, and we've hit 1 hour on the dot. So this was such a good conversation. Abby, thank you so much for sharing those insights with
You're
us. Thank you
welcome.
so much. And thank you for the work that you do. Please let the employers keep not liking you, because we on the other side, we
But
love you.
sadly,
Keep
they are my
carrying
they are my
right?
target. So when they
Abby,
start
no,
attacking me, when they
please
start attacking
keep
me,
carrying
I
the
always
banner
tell
for
them,
us.
you need me. I know you don't like me, but you need me because I'm the one that can
Exactly,
create a
exactly.
balance for you
Yes,
in
please
your
keep being that
organization.
for us. Please keep being that for us. Thank you so much, Abby, for giving us your time. And thank you
Yeah.
for all the gems that you've shared. Have a beautiful, beautiful day.
It's